Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean and Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin. I'm a certified health coach, trainer, and author. And this podcast is for middle-aged men and women looking to optimize their health and get their bodies back to what it once was 10 to 15 years ago. I will give you simple, actionable items to get long-term sustainable results. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. All right. Welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin. I hope you had a great weekend and hope you listened to my interview with Tim James. Definitely some cool tips to take to help, build a healthy lifestyle. One of them is the simple act of just chewing your food or making sure that obviously you're getting the correct water. He mentioned like a purified structured water, and there's some purifiers out there that you could definitely get if you wanted to upgrade what you were taking in. But definitely some great tips. And it was interesting that he talked about how he sort of went from a meat and fish eater to a vegetarian. And I'm actually ironically going to talk about how I went sort of the other way and was a while pescatarian for a while, and meaning just fish and veggies, and mainly like I remember I used to make a big salad with veggie burgers. Tried to find good quality veggie burgers because there's not too many on the market. A lot of them have what's called vegetable oils in them, and those are just things you want to avoid. If you listen to some of the podcasts, we talk about that. Canola, safflower, grapeseed, those type of oils. You want to avoid those, and those are in a lot of vegetable oil, veggie burgers. So keep an eye on that if you do have veggie burgers from time to time. So yeah, I wanted to talk about what made me start to get into eating nose to tail meat, organs, things like that. Actually, last night I had liver, and it really was a game changer. I actually started it beginning of COVID. So this was 2020, March, and really just eased my way back into it. A lot of reasons I stopped eating meat was the humane issues, and obviously I love animals, and but I justified it in the fact that this is something as a at a core that humans we've been eating for over 3 million years, and as long as I get the meat that is sustainable, raised humanely, and the animals are roaming and they're not in just conventional feedlots. This is what I look for when I get my meat or poultry. Although I don't really eat chicken, that's not really my thing, and I'm not a huge fan of it. If you listen to my interview with Dr. Ben Beekman, chicken is definitely overeaten. There's a lot of omega-6s in there, and it's really tough to find quality chicken. And really, chicken is just protein, which can be fine, but you definitely want to have protein with some fat. And that's why I prefer, like, if I'm going to have something, like a ribeye or something like that, occasionally mixing it up between lean meats and fattier meats. But anyways, the bottom line is whatever you're eating, I'm not trying to be dogmatic about it. I'm just going to tell you my reasoning behind going to meat, and one of them is getting more protein and getting a better quality protein, because a lot of vegan proteins out there, they're missing a lot of amino acids and things like that can play a role in helping you build muscle, which was a goal of mine. So I guess it depends on your goals and things like that. If you've eaten the standard American diet of red sugar and junk foods, and you decide to go and become a vegetarian, you're going to definitely have it's going to make an impact. It's going to play a great role in changing your health. But I don't know if in the long haul, being a vegetarian, you might find that you might be lacking in some nutrients. And I'm going to talk about that today. And there's ways to get around it. You can definitely supplement. So if that's for you, go for it. I'm going to talk about some of those today. I mean, a lot of the big arguments and what sort of got me into meat and nose to tail was Dr. Paul Saladino's book, which I have right here, actually, Carnivore Code. I remember reading that a couple years ago, and it just sort of clicked for me, and it made a lot of sense. And one of the main things he talked about was, these anti-nutrients that are, these are natural compounds that are found in plants. But these anti-nutrients protect plants from bacterial infections, and they protect plants from being eaten by predators because plants can't run. So this is like a self-defense mechanism. And these are things like oxalates, lectins, phytic acid. I mean, there's a whole list of them. And, some people don't react so well when they have these anti-nutrients. And back in the hunter-gatherer days, a lot of times they would soak or sprout or ferment vegetables to make them more tolerable to eat. But I truly believe that, our predecessors ate some plant foods, but these were more eaten as like survival foods rather than components of their diets that provided unique nutrients. So, I believe that, the human metabolism really thrives off fat and thrives off protein to grow and to build muscle and to just last as long as you can. Because we all know, obviously lack of muscle and bone mass, and people get what's called sarcopenia over time. And so we want to try to avoid that. So these anti-nutrients, also oxalates is another one. That oxalates, if you've heard of them, again, it's a defense weapon against predators that plants have, and it's very high in turmeric, spinach, rhubarb, almonds. And I will just say another book that I love, if you want to read a little bit more about this, is I had her on the podcast, Dr. Judy Choi, and I'm going to have her back on again. And her book, which I have right here, it's called The Carnivore Cure. I love this. I find myself going back to this book a ton. So hopefully I'll get her back on. But if you want to listen to that episode, and I'll dive a little deeper into carnivore-ish eating. And maybe this could be something if, maybe you have skin conditions or you have gut issues, and you find that when you're eating plants that they're causing issues. Now, some will argue that maybe you have to clean up everything, your gut, and as Tim James mentioned, if you're having trouble digesting plants, maybe it's a gut issue, not the fact that the plants have these anti-nutrients. And that could play a role. He mentioned something which I'm going to get done. It's like a colon hydrotherapy, where they actually he mentioned it in the podcast, and I did it a while back, but I'm going to do one tomorrow. So I'll report back on how that goes, where they put a gentle stream, into your body and into your anal gland, if I want to say, and get out fecal matter. And it's a gentle process, but I'll be doing that tomorrow. So I'll let you know how that goes again. But I think people who overdo, like, let's just say that green smoothie that they've had. I know Brad Kearns talks a lot about that. He used to have this green smoothie with kale and almonds and almond milk, and where you're just getting this inflow of oxalates every day. You actually produce it yourself. You produce about 10 to 30 milligrams of oxalates per day, but when you're having this smoothie, you're probably getting about 200 times that. And just imagine doing that every day. So 75% of kidney stones are made from calcium oxalate. So you want to be careful with that if you're overdoing it with these, turmeric, spinach, almond smoothie every morning. It might not play a good role in your health. And then it gets back to one of the things that I was looking into when I was getting into meat was, the traditional grain-fed meat, which you want to, I personally try to avoid as much as possible and go with grass-fed, grass-finished meat. There's so many great companies out there that you can order from and just keep it in your freezer, because grass-fed meat has been shown to have higher levels of, vitamin C, E, A, CoQ10, and lower amounts of pesticides like glyphosate, atrazine, dioxins, and mold toxins. So to me, grass-fed is the clear winner. And it's definitely worth the money. I don't spend a ton of money on a lot of things, but I do like to spend it on food, because if I'm putting it in my body, I want to make sure it's from a quality source. And then you run into, if you're not eating, if you're not getting protein from animal sources, quality animal sources, and you get run into, like, if you're having a lot of soy and tofu and, let's just say, pinto beans, the hormones of estrogen can play a role, and you definitely want to avoid that. So you don't want to overdo it with the soy and the tofu, which is, obviously soy protein, and then pinto beans and white bread and peanuts and things like that. So keep an eye on that if that's become an intricate role in your diet. You just want to be careful with that hormone. You don't want too much estrogen. And then, people make the argument regarding the environment factor, as far as, it's bad for the environment as far as animals, these feedlots and things like this. But I actually learned this through the carnivore cure, that one almond, well, let's just say this: water used in the production of meat is much lower than water used to grow nuts. People don't realize this. And this was just one example that I pulled from the book Carnivore Cure, but one almond requires nearly 1.1 gallons of water. So I can't imagine how much water is used, especially in California, which is where we get most of our almonds, to supply for, the country and the world. And then, there's the question about what vitamins and minerals am I going to be getting from, excuse me, from eating meat. And vitamin A is a big one, and that can be found in animal foods. The retinol vitamin A. People say, well, you can get that from maybe some things like sweet potatoes, but sweet potatoes, it's in the form of beta carotene. You would need to have a lot of them, like almost a pound of sweet potatoes, to get what you would want as far as vitamin A is concerned. All right, I'm losing my voice. No, we're back. Vitamin B12 is another big one. So if you are not eating meat, you might want to have a good quality B complex. Another one was creatine. And creatine is something we produce 1 gram per day, but that's really not enough for optimal performance. And they found that it could be linked to optimal performance, not only for our muscles, but for our brain. Creatine supplementation had a significant positive effect on both working memory and intelligence for both tasks that require speed of processing. So creatine is one of these things that's been highly researched, and whether you're a meat eater or not, this is something I think you should supplement with a quality creatine, especially if you're lifting weights. Also, carnitine. Carnitine is another one that you can find mainly in animal foods. And this helps us use our fat stores for energy. So we talk a lot about that, using fat for fuel in the form of ketones. So you definitely want carnitine. Choline's another one. Deficiencies of choline associated with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. There's been neurodegenerative diseases and heart disease. And so you definitely want choline. You can get choline from egg yolks, liver, and kidney. It is in broccoli, but you would need to eat a ton. I won't swear on this. You'd have to eat a ton, more than a pound, to get the right amount. That's a lot. So carnosine is another one. This is a molecule that acts as endogenous antioxidant, much like glutathione. So we can have small amounts from our diet, but this helps. Carnosine actually helps reduce the form of advanced glycation end products. And this is something that you can get from eating processed foods, or even charring your meats too much, and they can cause inflammation. So carnosine can help counteract what's called AGEs. And then taurine is another valuable nutrient found in animal foods that can also help reduce AGEs, which has been linked to inflammation and aging quicker. So those are just some of the benefits that you can get from eating animal foods. And lastly, protein, which I talked about. Protein and fat are big ones, right? Those are macronutrients that you want to fuel the body with. Protein, it's not only how much protein you get in the food, but it's how bioavailable the protein is. And that's sort of where I think I fell short when I was just eating mainly vegetarian and some fish. Is I just felt like I wasn't getting enough protein for the amount of activity I was doing. And obviously we want to avoid things like osteoporosis. We want to maintain muscle mass, which is critical also for insulin sensitivity throughout our life. So Also, as you age, we need more protein because our body is less able to digest and absorb protein. All right. So you need more than you think as you get older. Beef, egg, even pork. I'm not a pork eater, and fish are some of the higher bioavailability of protein that you can get from foods. And then, you can get protein from rice, kidney beans, peas, and tofu. But like I said, you just got to be careful. First of all, you're not going to have the high bioavailability of those. So you're not going to get what's necessarily on the label per se. And then you have things like tofu, which, you sort of want to, like I mentioned with the estrogens, want to avoid soy protein as much as possible. So also too is the amino acid part of it as well. Vegan proteins effectively don't stimulate muscle growth and repair due to one of the amino acids is lower leucine. Leucine is high in eggs. And so that is one of the amino acids that helps with muscle protein synthesis. And there's other essential amino acids that you get from meats and you cannot get from a lot of vegan proteins. So you just got to be careful about that. And then fat, which I mentioned, trying to combine, like Ben Beekman said, he said, we're really, if you look at most natural proteins out there, they come with fat other than mainly chicken. So try to get a little fat with your protein, helps with satiation with your meals. And it's really a preferred fuel source from our brain, considering our brain is 60% fat. So all cells require fat for proper structure and functioning. Also, the brain needs fat soluble vitamins and cholesterol for cognitive function, memory, and proper nerve function. So don't be afraid of those saturated fats, those healthy fats that you can get. Also get them from avocado. Again, if you're not going to have meat, you could probably get them from avocado, maybe some coconut oil. You can cook in that, but I always say you want to cook in ghee or butter. And if you're going to use olive oil, maybe drizzle that onto foods. So yes, that was some of the reasons why I wanted to get into adding in some animal proteins into my diet. And it really did help me in the gym, and also make sure that I wasn't deficient in, vitamin B12 and creatine and choline and some of the other things that I mentioned already today. So anyways, those are my reasonings. If you have yours, or if you want to stick to what you're doing, and if working, go for it. And if you're eating the standard American diet with a lot of processed food, whether you go vegetarian, pescatarian, or let's just say carnivore-ish, it's going to be a big step up, and you're going to see a major impact in your health. So find what works for you and stick with it. And hope this maybe was informative and helped you understand what got me into eating nose to tail. So thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day. And I will talk to you at the end of the week with another interview. Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangrin.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.